Hello everybody, this is Purge, bringing you guys another neutral camp blocking and dewarding video. I had to make a new one because Reborn 2 changed the skin on the map, and there's different bushes and trees and sticks and stuff like that we need to look at. So let's hop into the game. I'm going to be using this really cool custom game. It's actually the highest rated custom game on the lobby. It's called Neutral Camp Spawn Boxes. You can find it just by searching custom games on your custom games tab. And then download it and open it up. You'll get to this screen. I'm going to choose my hero. I'm going to choose a ranged hero because I'd like to have the ability to not have to go into melee range to kill wards. And you just hop on in, and then you need to adjust a lot of these settings on the left side. We'll take off experience range, we'll turn the fog of war off so we can see everything on the map. We'll remove sentry and ward vision, and we'll also remove tower ranges and things like that. Although one really cool thing that we can see very quick is the tower attack range. It's about here. The tower true sight. This is something that you're going to maybe want to look into because, for example, when you're pushing towers, you need to know where the safe place to put your sentry is. When I'm pushing this tower, for example, the safest place is about here. So that's important because you may or may not need that when you're pushing high ground. And it also lets you know where you can place wards, for example. So I know that I can place wards in this area, or here, but I can't put it a little bit too north here. This one, sometimes I place badly as well, but we're not going to talk about that. Ignoring that, let's take a look at the spawn box. First of all, things you need to buy: one observer ward, one sentry ward, a quelling blade, and a tango, probably just in case you take damage. The only thing this custom game is really missing is experience, or I'm sorry, cheats basically. So max gold, WTF mode. It would basically let me to blink around the map rapidly. Instead, you have to walk, which is kind of stupid. I don't know why that it doesn't exist in this game, but it doesn't. But the important part is you can place unlimited amounts of sentries without having to buy more, and they're also at 1 HP, so they're very, very easy to kill. So you don't have to worry about destroying them, putting some commands in. But I wish it had gold and unlimited levels. So these are our spawn boxes. This makes it a lot easier to visualize exactly where our spawns are because you can see them with your eyes. And if you block something, you can tell just by the box turning to red instead of green. So all camps in the game spawn only if nothing is in their box. And every box is shaped differently. This one's has this weird... Oh, actually it doesn't have a line, but... I feel like... Does that block? I'll look at that later. But they all have boxes, and if you place anything within that box, then that camp will not spawn at the 30-second mark. So for example, I was standing in this box, the creeps did not spawn. These other ones, there was nothing in these boxes, so the creeps spawned. So that's interesting to know. So this gives us a tactical advantage. If I'm playing the Dire offlane, for example, and I want to prevent the Radiant supports from pulling, all I have to do is place a sentry, an observer ward, or a neutral creep, or a creep within that AoE. So if I'm playing Nature's Prophet, for example, I can put a creep in the box, or I can put an illusion that I grabbed from an illusion rune in that box to prevent the camp from spawning. So let's think of some really cool places that we can put it. Now, your first trick is to put it somewhere that they don't expect it to be. That way they put their sentries far away. Most people you play against aren't going to be good with their sentries. Like, to get maximum sentry coverage, for example, you're going to put it right next to the line so that it doesn't block, but it gives you the most surface area coverage. So any observer wards or sentry wards within this area, I would be able to see with the sentry. But most people don't know these exact lines, so what they'll do is they'll actually put their sentries in places like this. They'll be like, I don't really know where the line is, so I'll put it here. And then what happens is you're missing a little bit of surface area in the middle, and this gives you more space to hide your wards. So if you're playing against bad people, you can get away with placing lazy wards sometimes. But if you just out mind game your opponents a little bit, you can very easily beat them in this, and then it guarantees that their supports can't pull, they're going to be under leveled, you're going to get more experience, you can pressure the carry more. It leads to cascading effects. So knowing how to block camps is very, very important. So let's look at some common spots. This is probably the most common spot here on the Radiant Pull camp. Terrible spot though, unless you're trying to be super meta. Most players will walk to here, and then they'll place a sentry or an observer ward right on the middle of the camp. But the better places are basically every extreme. We want to put it somewhere really obscure that we're not expecting our opponents to expect. So here's a really obscure one. You could put it on the left side point as well. You can also put it in this point. This is called the magic bush. It's because of this bush right here, but in reality it's more like the magic rectangle. You can pretty much put a sentry in any space up here, and it'll block both of these two camps. This is still red because I have these in here, but this anywhere in here is pretty good. I used to always put it right there on the bush, but in reality we have a big rectangle that we can place it in. So this is a possible place you can put, but the problem is that if your opponents see that both this camp and this camp are blocked, they'll very likely put a sentry down here. and it's going to spot your magic bush very, very easily. So I don't really recommend the magic bush unless you're talking about really trying to decrease your opponent's farm in the mid to late game by killing 2 of their camps. That's one thing you can do. So these corners are pretty good. To counter corners, the best thing people will do usually, probably shouldn't kill these, but to counter the corners, the best thing you can do is usually put one right in the middle, like about here. This is probably the place that I should deward more in the future, I feel, because it might be slightly off place, might be a little too north, but it basically covers all of the lower half. And this is actually a huge amount of surface area that it covers. Almost all of the camp is covered here by this sentry ward. Let me just see if this actually does block. I feel like it does. Yeah, it does. It's a little bit too high. Like right there. Even that one's a little iffy, but again, it covers a lot of surface area. It'll spot a lot of those wards. And actually, if you look at the shape of the circle, it's a little bit off place. I need to put it more left. Right about here. Alright, that one looks a lot more even. So this is basically our ideal, one of our 2 ideal deward spots. If your opponents block your camp, this one's really, really good, because it's going to cover all of your corner spots, most of your on-camp spots, and also some of the tricky ones on the side. Because this is one of the more common places to ward. Or deward, that is. Another common place to deward is right at the maximum limit of this. To kill this, you usually have to eat a tree first, because otherwise I don't have space here. Trees block your ability to place sentry wards. As you can see, my cursor is red. You can place above them slightly, but that's putting them a little bit far away. You see that only reaches so far. Instead, if you kill a tree, use a Quelling Blade to do this, or Tango, both work. You can place a little bit lower, like right there. That doesn't block, and you get a lot more vision. So with these 2 sentries, we see almost all of our camp. And these are the 2 most common deward spots by far. So what you basically do now is you say, how good is my opponent at dewarding, and where do I expect them to ward? Well, if you look at the cross-section, there are a couple places here and here that aren't being covered. Some other common spots for blocking, you can do it in here. There's a little space right in here in the trees. To reveal this one, you have to eat 1 tree, and then you can walk in and you can find it in here. So that one's possible, but this one covers that one. So really, I feel like the strongest points that are a little tricky right now are basically at the right or left maximums. These aren't very good observer ward spots, but it's a very good block spot with a sentry, because as you can see, this one is not spotted. So there's little triangles here at each corner that are blocked. So those spots are very good right now. This one as well. Or you can place it up here, for example. This one's maybe not as good because the top spot is going to catch it 100%. But sometimes, if this camp's blocked and this one's not, a lot of times they won't anticipate it being over here. So there's a chance that it won't be grabbed, but I think this spot is bad. I think the best spots right now are basically either corner piece. You can maybe do it in here if your opponents really don't understand. Or maybe even, you can do a spot in here as well. This one's okay. Sometimes people don't check in here. You can actually walk all the way in here, block with this spot. But either way, this deward spot is going to catch most of those. Therefore, probably the best spots right now are either extreme corner. Probably this corner is maybe better than this one. Other than that, I would say these 2 spots are probably the best spots in the game right now. Now, these can be dewarded from the side. Somebody could place a sentry right here, for example, to spot those out. Oops. Oh yeah, this way. So I would deward that about here. This still covers pretty good vision as well from the left side, and it'll cover these extreme spots, but then we're looking at extremities down here. Same goes for the right side. Put a sentry down. Boom. Oops, I need to move out of this. Then we're looking at another spot again. We're looking at right here. This one's going to block then and not get spotted. So it pretty much comes down to, do you expect your opponents to do side sentry wards or do north-south sentry wards? And sometimes they'll maybe do a mix of both. Maybe they'll do this one and they'll do this one. It's all based on your opponent seeing you, basically. That's a huge component of blocking camps, is spotting, letting your not letting your opponents see where you're standing. For example, if I see somebody run all the way in from the offlane, and then I get to here, and I see them right here, and they're running away, I know for a fact that they put a detection ward somewhere in this area, because they ran all the way down here to place it. So if I'm a support and I'm running here and I see their offlane right here, this gives me an educated guess that their ward is probably in this area, in which case I would almost for sure, I would sentry right here to check, because it's probably in this area. If I get to here and I see my opponent running this way, I'm going to expect the block to be here or to be over here, most likely. So that's really important. That's one of the things you should do as a support. Run to your lane really fast and notice your opponent coming so you can have an educated guess on where he's supposed to be. So that's the first pole camp on the Radiant side. This one's pretty huge and a little bit tricky. Again, there's 4 deward spots essentially, and there's a lot of mind games you can do. Whether you put it in corners, whether you put it in midpoints, all of that stuff is a possibility. This camp's also important because if your pull camp is not blocked, you still want to be able to pull it through to something, because otherwise it requires you to stack first, and it's a lot more efficient to basically pull this camp and then pull through to this camp, because you can kill that every minute or so. Whereas if you have to stack first, it takes about 2 minutes, and it also doesn't give you as much experience, because it takes about 2 waves usually, or some auto attacking with spells, to kill a double stack small camp, depending on what spawns. So if you're scared about getting dewarded here, you can also block this camp, and to do that there's a couple tricky ways. Now there's a spot over here you can put. That one's going to block. This one's actually something I discovered just by messing around. I think that one's pretty cool. It looks like you can place down here and it blocks because of the box, but the box does not work like this. I think this is just a limitation of the program. It doesn't actually block all the way down here. This one actually curves along the line of the cliff. So you have to be on the cliff. Here's another spot. This one also blocks. This one's really hard to find, frankly. If you want to block this spot, I feel like this is the best spot by far. This one in the trees. Because the only way that you're going to see this is if you have an observer ward over here or over here, because that would give you vision in this area. Or they would have to kind of know the spot, and they would have to come here and they would have to kill this tree, in which case they could walk over here. So that spot's really good for blocking. You could also put extremities, put one down here. I think this one would be really good. Almost everybody that I see block this camp here, they put their observer ward right here. And they do this. I'll show you the vision here. I'll turn off Fog of War. I'll hide around the corner. The reason they do this is because it still gives vision of the rune spot, and it also gives some vision over here. So this is a very, very common observer ward spot that people put down. But I don't think this one is very good. I think I saw a team putting one down over here as well. They did an observer ward like right here, I think. We'll see what this gives. It's not a lot of vision, but it's something, right? That's important. Might aggro me here. We'll see. It gives some vision of the rune. It gives some vision of a little bit of the river, and it blocks, and it gives them some vision. I think this is a safer version of that. If you're expecting your opponents to deward you, then I think that one is good. If you think your opponents are clowns, then putting it right there is going to be not a big deal. That's going to work out just fine. Some other places you can place, you can hide them in here. You can put them at the extreme points. But again, going down here is a little dangerous, because it's very possible that, well, if you block both this camp and this camp, I strongly recommend against putting an observer ward or a sentry here, because if they're dewarding this place, they're very often going to place here, which means that you're going to get caught. Basically, they're going to look to deward this camp, and they're going to then catch you here. Don't try to give them double value, basically. Make sure that they're outside of range. So, for example, even this sentry is a little bad because it's giving vision. So, any other cool spots we can do? We can see if we can place a sentry ward over here. Ooh, looks like we can. We can actually block it right there. There's another little ward spot that you can do that will deward. Although, I'm not a huge fan of this one, because I feel like the most common deward spot to this camp is to just place a sentry over here. And this covers almost all of the camp, really. So with that said, your best 2 spots, in my opinion, are this spot, that like basically one of these 2 spots, or you can place maybe up here. Let's see if we can find, oh yeah, you can find a little patch in there too. Ooh. See if that one does it, and it does. This spot also blocks. This one's really good. I actually like this one a lot. This may be the best spot. If you're just placing a sentry, I would put here. This one looks to be the best. There's a lot of little things like that that you can find just by messing around in your games. You can put it on the extreme as well, but I like it better when it's hidden in the trees like this, because this gives you less ability to see it. Like, for example, if I put an observer ward down here and I walk away, let's take a look at that vision. I think this observer ward is actually spotting the scent. Oh, no, it's not actually. Look. See? Can't see it. It's darkened out a little bit. We actually can't see the sentry ward. So there's a very low chance of somebody being able to spot that one. I think this is the best ward here for blocking that pull camp. And again, that's still going to help a lot. If you block the pull through camp, it's going to make a big difference in your pull. So, all right, I'm going to go run to the other side of the map. I will be right back. All right, I've walked across the map, and now we're to the other side. This is the dire pull camp. This one's very easy to block and deward as a whole because it's much smaller, which means that a sentry placed near it is going to cover, oops, that's a observer ward. A sentry placed near it is going to cover almost all of the vision. except for this little pesky corner in the upper right. Now, our sentry placement down here is actually pretty wide. It's a little hex of space, so it's about a rectangle. So there's basically a lot of places that you can put sentries in here. So I think your placement ends up being very important. So for example, this one I placed a little bit too close to the right, and I ended up blocking my own camp. But if you place this correctly, you actually have a pretty big difference in surface area. See how much that makes a difference in the corner here? So knowing the perfect outer explanation of this, or the outer limit of this, is really important. So this is the best Deward you can put down. A little bit to the right, but not too far right. Because if you're basically right to the right of the right limit, you're going to block. You have to go a little bit past that. So this is going to cover all the common spots right on top of the camp, in front of the camp. But it won't get this corner spot. And the corner spot is what we need to learn if you guys want to be really nasty in your pubs. So you need to figure out what is it on the ground that's going to show me exactly where this corner is. I mean, it's important on this side as well, but we have kind of obvious things, right? We have like a little bush, we have these little yellow dots, and then it goes over to the tree, and then over to the other tree. That's pretty straightforward. But this one is a lot harder, and you have to be a little bit more exact with where you place it. So the point to look for that I looked at is this little patch of yellow right here. So you see this clump of yellow, then you have this little tiny patch of yellow. I'll zoom in here in case you guys can't see very well, but I'm looking for this little stripe of yellow. And then it comes down, and this distance here is about half of this. Let me double check. Why is this key? This really shouldn't. I think it's because I turned off Fog of War, so these guys can see me. God, I have mana. Oh my god. Spawn box. So this distance here is about half of this length. So, yeah, that's kind of irrelevant. Basically, I'm a little bit below the flower. I guess the real thing to look at is this square here. It's approximately square shaped. This is pretty much my safe zone. Anything above this is too far. So this is the box I'm looking for, and within that box, I'm actually slightly to the right of it. It's hard to tell because the spawn box is like slightly elevated, you can tell graphically. But basically from directly above, it looks like I'm looking at pretty much like on the righter limits. Let's turn off the spawn box again. We'll wait till that goes away. And we're basically planted right on the right side of that little square below the yellow circle. Damn it. So this is probably the most extreme block we can get. And if you take a look at the sentry here, it actually doesn't get it. So we're blocked. The sentry does not detect it. And we've got a block camp that's going to take your opponent 2 sentries to deward. If they place on the right side, yeah, they're set. And in fact, I dare say this sentry is a little bit better right now, because I think this is going to be a pretty common ward spot. But that kind of depends on how things develop in pubs. This one's slightly dangerous though, because the spots that this does not cover are the spots over here, which are semi-common. So let's take a look at those really quick. Again, that's our deward spot. I'm going to kill this for now. We'll compare the dewards. You can place down here. This one blocks. You can place a little bit more right than that. Quite a bit more right than that. Place all the way over here. This one doesn't even get close to any of those. I think there are not any spots over here, as we can see by painting the cursor. But there are some spots on the lower end. You can also place from down here. Although I might not be able to make it. Both of these 2 block. And this sentry actually does catch both of these, surprisingly. I thought I checked that I checked that in Reborn 1, and I didn't feel like that dewarded, so let me see. Looks like you might be able to squeeze a sentry in here. I don't know if we kill all these. See if we can squeeze one in there. This one looks like it does not actually catch it. So if your sentry up here is bad, aka a little bit too far to the left, and you put a perfect sentry ward on the right side, you can also hide from here. But again, 2 sentries should cover you. This is 1 sentry, and this is going to be the second one. Although, you might be able to get away. I'm kind of wasting this sentry here by putting it so high. So this one's actually kind of bad. Don't ever place that one. Where you should place this one is right under this tree, I feel. Does that do better? That one does better, but we still have a little bit of a gap here. But I think that's a very uncommon spot. This might be the best sentry that you can place, actually. Although it doesn't catch this little spot now. It's tough, man. Maybe what I would do is I would put it here. Let's kill this just to make sure we're not blocking. This does not block. This catches almost all of this. This catches all of this. I think this one's pretty good. I may put sentries here in the future. Because if people start learning about this corner, then this ends up being the best spot. If people are still in their old ways, this one's the best. So, lots of little things you can do here, and lots of little places that you can squeeze out a little bit of value from your blocks. But I think my favorite places to block here are definitely the right side of this. Right there. I like this one a lot, because it's very far from this. And oh, damn it. This range creeps, man. Why do they aggro so far? And the other one that I really like is, I've seen some people do some tricky tree stuff here. Like they'll come in here and they'll eat a tree. So they'll eat that tree, for example, and then they'll hide a sentry in here. So there's only space if you kill the tree, basically. So by doing this, and if we remove Fog of War, I actually can't see that. I can't see that sentry. It should be going away. Yeah, I can't see it. So the only way somebody would see that is if they walk past, I believe. They'd have to walk past and try to walk inside, and they actually can't because it's the diagonal. So that one would be kind of hard to find. I think those are the two best ones. But you have to use a Tango or a Quelling Blade to get that one. So I think those are the best spots on this. This is the pole camp, a little bit easier to deal with than the other side. A little bit more straightforward, a little bit smaller. Now, the large camp, oh my god, this one is a huge AoE. It's very, very easy to block this one. Most times, when this camp is blocked and I'm playing as support, I'm expecting the Observer Ward to be here. Because a lot of people will say, like, oh, I want to see the supports coming. They'll put the Observer Ward down. And that gives them really good vision. Because they can see over here, they can see this way, they can see down here. But the problem is it blocks the camp, so it kind of makes it obvious where the Observer Ward is. And in most cases, I'll just put a sentry down about here. And that's going to deward just about everything. Maybe better to actually place it about here. This should be your midpoint. Always aim for the midpoint because it gives you the most length into your spawn box. So this one is actually even a little bad. Let's put it there. Alright, this is pretty much the best one. And it's right on line with the tree, as you can see. This is our upper limit. So look for the tree, cut over to the right. And that is basically our line. Put it slightly above that, and that gives us as much vision as possible. So putting an Observer Ward anywhere in this box, I think is pretty bad. I don't really recommend that. You could maybe do something like put it over here in the upper corner. But I think that one's pretty easy to deward, because when it's blocked again, common conception is that you're expecting a ward to be here. So I think this one's a little bit weak. This one in the corner here. I would say the better place to put it if you want to be tricky, don't put here either. Pretty much anything here or here is bad. Again, range creep wants to die. If you want to be tricky, I think a place down here is really good. Put it on a corner here. Or most likely, honestly, this limit is safer. This corner is by far the best for blocking. It's also a decent Observer Ward position as well. You could just put it like right here. This one's very good. So let's take a look at the vision it gives us. Let's go hide here. Damn it, range creep, leave me alone. These range creeps, man. Okay, so this one is the bottom right. It's going to give me a lot of river vision. It's going to notice heroes running this way, heroes running up this way. Really good vision. You can also notice the supports coming from the pole over to harass you. So I think an Observer Ward way down here is very good. This right limit is basically based on, you can look at the, I don't know, the fire pits, I guess. Let's turn off the spawn box here for a sec. It's pretty much along these two rocks here. About there. And that goes straight up. It's also at this point here, where the white line concedes, or meets. It's kind of like this, basically. Straight up. So you want to put it as far right as possible, because that way it has more vision around the tree. Otherwise, if you put it here, it cuts off the vision vertically. So you want to put it as right as possible. It'll block this camp, and it'll still give you vision. Now, if you're playing offlane, you sometimes don't want to do that, because Dire or Radiant offlane can also pull, because it's very easy to just go here. You can attack this tree when your creeps are at the tower, and then you run left. And by doing that, it basically resets the wave, and allows your wave to pass up to the trees. So for example, if I stack this. I messed up, I didn't run close enough to the creeps, but it's still going to work just fine. I can run left here, I can aggro this wave, And if they're busy farming into the tower, then that's fine. I can sit here and I can kill these creeps. But most of the time, you pull it to the right, and then the approaching creep wave comes with you, and you go to the tower to last hit and get gold. Now, your opponents are usually able to kill the neutral creep along with their camp, but if you get lucky and it's like a dark troll creep, it'll kill the creeps pretty fast because it does piercing damage, and you're likely to get extra experience. But this is just a very, very easy pull that you can do, basically, that guarantees you getting farm and stuff like that. So, boom, I get levels and all that good stuff. So you don't always want to block the large camp if you're playing Radiant offlane, but it's a really good way to screw over your opponent. And more importantly, the important part is, look at the spawn box. How the hell do you deward this thing? It's so big. It's so difficult. One thing I really wish more supports would do is give an offlaner a sentry ward. I think that would be really beneficial. Because one sentry ward is so much less dangerous. If you put an observer ward down just to block, it's easier for your opponents to figure out where it is. But if you put an observer ward down, like, let's say I block with a sentry, and I put it in like here. And then I take an observer ward, and I put it like here, as an offlane hero. And then I look at the vision that's giving me. It's so much better. Well, I would want to cut this tree down, because look how much better that vision is. But I wouldn't want to cut the tree down because this is going to make it obvious that I have an observer ward there, but putting one like here would be really good because then you're still getting right side vision. By doing this, you get to retain your observer ward, but you also make them waste sentries on this position. And the first 3 minutes is the most important anyways, so if they pull later, it's not that big of a deal. Because it'll miss them pulls for about 2 minutes or so, which is pretty nice. So sentries are probably more valuable to use, but the important thing is you got to choose what you want to block, and if you do really want to block, I recommend blocking this camp and putting your sentry somewhere over here. You can also be tricky, putting it behind trees, for example. Or I could put it right here between these 2 trees, maybe. Or I could put it right here. Right here. Or I could put it left, or I could put it here, or I could put it here. Anywhere basically on this bottom half I think is going to be really good. Or maybe right here. So let's check this as well. I think right here would be pretty good. Again, common dewarding spots. That one's actually not good. Put it like right there. This one's really good. Putting it like a sentry here or an observer ward here would be pretty good. Boom. Somebody puts a sentry to the right side, boom, you're screwed. But most people, I think, are going to put a sentry here. And then when they put a sentry there and it doesn't work, they'll say, huh, where the heck is it? They might put a sentry down here. And that would be pretty good for them. I'm going to get aggroed. Oh, well. Let's got this in. Oh, I can put a sentry right there. That's nice. That's a really good deward spot. Don't kill me, neutrals. This is why I wish I had cheats so I could murder them. But this spot's pretty good. You can cover most of the spots with this. Put it right on the cliff there. That's probably the best south one that you can put down. Oh, you can put one here too. This one's probably a little better. But either of these is good. So these are your dewards. These are the best place to put observer wards, I think. If you're trying to be scary and like tricky and put sentries down, I think you can even put one like right here, for example. I killed that tree, so maybe you can't. You probably can't put a sentry there, but I killed the tree, so I cheated. Anyways, that's the 2 pull camps. That's probably pretty much everything you need to know about those. We can go over ancients and the other unimportant camps. So if you guys don't play support or you don't expect to be dewarded heavily, I think this is information that may be a little unnecessary, but could be important if you're getting blocked if you're playing like Enigma or Chen or something like that. Ancients are definitely important though. We can look at those really quick. We'll start with the Radiant Ancients. They're pretty much unchanged. The only major difference from my last video is that this crevice here can no longer house sentries or observer wards. In the past, you could put a sentry ward all the way through this path. No longer you can. You can still put sentries to block over here. Some of these places are a little tricky. Most people, when they're dewarding it, well, basically most people when they block it, they'll put a sentry here because it's the fastest. You run up, you put the sentry down, you run away. The trickiest place is either going to be down here. You can put one behind this tree. I like this one a lot. Your 2 spots are basically here, here. Those are your right and left extremes. Tricky would be up here, behind the trees. That one's kind of hard to get to because you'd have to eat this tree with a Quelling Blade or a Tango. So blocking here is pretty good, but then you usually have to take ancient damage to do that. That one's kind of sucks, unless you're smoked. You could also put right limit, but I don't think that one's really good either because most people will deward right here. Our limits are right along the pole, so if we turn the spawn box off, it's pretty straightforward. Same as the last patch. Luckily they didn't change that one because I like that one was clear. It's got a pull. It goes south. Pull south, and then a pull west. And that is our spawn box, just like that. Boom. Almost exactly the same. So if you want to be lazy, put it here. If you want to be super lazy, put it here. But if you want to be a little tricky, slide it off to a corner. Put it like right here. Does that one get spotted? Sure as hell doesn't. So spots like these are pretty good. To deward from the left side, I think the best thing you can do is, unfortunately, you're kind of stuck to putting it right here, I feel. Right most extreme. But even still, with this sentry here and this sentry here, you should cover almost all your surface area. But as a whole, most people will just be quick about blocking ancients. They'll put a sentry down here. Makes me kind of want to start putting observer wards here, actually. I want to see what this vision gives. Let's go run far away. This might be interesting. A lot of people are putting observer wards by ancient stacks right now to fight around it. And I kind of like this one. Shows ancient stack, shows rotations going this way. This is a pretty common path to run to the secret shop to go to the top lane. But it's also very rarely dewarded. This is a common spot as well. But this one's in the middle of this spot and this spot. Although if you do block ancients, it's very likely that people will deward it. So if you want to have vision over the ancients without blocking it, I would put the observer ward here, personally. Here or here. Somewhere in here. I think it's the best. Alright, that's Radiant Ancients. Alright, and we are on the Dire Ancients now. This box is a little bit weird, kind of small, but there's a lot of tricky places you can put things down to get vision or to block. This one's actually doesn't do it. I could have swore it did. There we go. That one's pretty hard to place. You have to place it to... Does the rightmost extreme? Does that work too? Okay, so basically you have to just be careful not to put it too north, because there's a big area where you're not going to block here. This one's really tricky, because you have to be on high ground to notice it, but it's not that big of a deal, I guess, because if you do deward here, for example, and I run to the high ground, I'm going to see this. There's no trees in the way. But this one's kind of nice. I wouldn't say it's good. It's more of a deward spot, I would say. If you want a good and it's not even that good of a deward spot. The best deward spot's probably about here, I would say. This covers almost all of everything. If you're blocking this camp, what is a good spot though? It looks like we can block over here on the cliff. Right here. That's a good spot. Do we have vision of that is the question. And it looks like we're not going to have vision of that. If we go here to deward, we say, oh, that's weird. There's no observer wards. And then we go over this way. Will we see it? Yes, right here we see it. Right there. Right there we can see it. But I think this is probably the best place to block the Dire camp. This one looks pretty tricky compared to the other side of the map. I like this one a lot. Let's see if we can find any more. All I gotta do is hover your mouse over your area. Yeah, we can put sentries and crap right in the middle, but that's usually not very good in my opinion. Ooh, what do we got here? What does that one look like? Wait till the natural vision goes away. We'll see what the vision is like. Okay, it's hidden, it's hidden, it's hidden. I can see it right there, I think. Well, it's not that hard to hide, to find. Any spots on the cliff or anything? Doesn't look like it. You can put one in the back right corner. You're gonna get attacked for that one, but I think those are the two best spots basically. You can be lazy and throw it right on the center and hope that your opponents don't deward you. Or you can put in the back right corner if you have an invis or smoke. You might be able to place that from the right side actually. Or you can place this corner spot here. Those are probably the two best spots. This one you can actually do pretty easily because you can do it from the right side for sure. See, I can place it here. Or I might be able to come over here. Yeah, I can actually. So that's pretty cool. You can actually very, very easily block these ancients. You just need to come to the right side of the river. If the tier 1 tower is already dead, this is very, very simple to do. And it's very difficult to deward these right sides ones. I would say, oh, the only downside is that observer wards. You have a very, very common observer ward spot up here. And a lot of people put sentries up here. And this sentry does catch these two. So I would say the best place to block here is definitely this upper right corner. Easily. Because this is a very, very common sentry spot. If somebody actually seriously wants to deward this, all they need to do is cut down trees and then put a sentry here. And then they'll spot it. But forcing them to use sentries and maybe deward this is very difficult. Another thing I want to see, what's our vision like if we put an observer ward here? What does this do for us? Hide over here. It gives pretty much nothing, but it does block the ancient camp. So against, it's probably not worth committing observer wards to blocking this camp, unless you're putting them like here. But that's a little bit about the ancient camps. Alright, let's go to the next camp. Alright, we'll start with the dire camps first, and then we'll get over to the radiant, and then we are done. So first things first, this camp is pretty huge. Very large camp. The biggest area to play around with putting sentries and things like down is some tree clumps over here, and this high ground. Now you can't block on the low ground here, despite it looking like that, but you can block here, along this clump here. There's lots of little tricky places here that you can put things down. I like these a little bit. They're hidden by trees a little bit. You can deward them pretty easily though. Putting a sentry up here gives vision. The best spots are generally up on this cliff actually. And the nastiest way to place these wards up here. Let's see if we can block over here. Oh, I should kill these first. Nastiest place to block. Where did I get that vision? I think it was over here. That was just on the ground. That's boring. I've seen a lot of players do things like cut this tree down. Like for example, right now I've got nowhere to place. But if you use a tango, and I think you can use a tango up there. I think you have to run into here to tango, but you can put a sentry up there then. But then the problem becomes if your opponents come along and they go to deward this, what they can do is put a sentry right, well they can't put it right on top, but they can put it here, for example, and then they can deward yours with the small vision it provides and stop you from doing that. So with that said, I think there's some tricky ones you can maybe put down. You can play with your opponents, make them think you did that tree, but then you go over here and put a sentry down up here. Blocking these camps is really only important if you're playing against a hero like Chen Enchantress or maybe Enigma. I feel like Enigma's maybe hurt most from these two camps being killed because you can very easily run back and forth and jungle them very rapidly. This camp kind of hurts as well. So if you're playing against an Enigma, probably the best thing you could do is focus the sentry on this camp and focus the sentry on this camp. But with that said, there's a lot of extremes as well that we can look at. For example, we have this vertical line, which pretty much tells us the upper bound. This one's actually pretty important to know because people often place observer wards somewhere in this area. I myself like placing obs here a lot. But this one's not bad either, really. The important part is being far away from this hill. So what we should say is we should put, if I want to put an observer ward aggressively as the radiant, I want to put an observer ward anywhere in this big hole here. Because I don't want it to block, because then they know where it is. And I don't want it to be close to this hill. So basically, I would want to put it anywhere here or here. This ward's really good too. I've seen a lot of people do this one. Spot's a little bit south. Spot's a little bit east. That one's quite good. And then for this camp here, a couple tricky spots. We can squeeze one into here. Not very good. I think there's a space right here. Yep. This one's pretty simple. Boom. Put it down, walk away. Inside trees, they have to kill a tree to find it. They have to put a sentry in the area anyways. But the camp itself is not very large. So it's pretty easy to deward. This is a bad sentry, and look how much space I get, basically. Best place to deward probably is here, though. Very close to the line. Gives you pretty much everything that you're going to need. Although you can block up here as well. This is a good spot. I would deward here, or I would block with this. So I feel like most people are going to put their sentry down here, or they'll put it down here. If they put it to the right, you're screwed. You're going to get caught. But I think this one's pretty good. There's also some spots over here. People will put it on... I thought you could put it on this cliff. Did they change that? I feel like you used to be able to put it on a cliff over here, but maybe not anymore. It looks like you'd be able to place there, but you can't. You can just do that spot. That spot's pretty interesting. Yeah, in trees is usually the best. Maybe the right extreme. That's probably the places I would put on that camp. And then we'll do the last camp. This one's pretty straightforward. In trees, on high ground. You have to cut down trees to get to it. That one's really, really good. Put an observer or a sentry there. This one's so hard to deward, honestly. There's so many places where you can put wards. Can I put the observer that far? Okay, let's see what that looks like. Now we're doing in the sleigh. It's almost good. This ward is almost good. Gives some vision of the river. Doesn't give you a rune vision. Not good. I wouldn't put an obs there. I put a sentry. Anywhere in here is really good for blocking. You can't do that cliff. You cannot do anywhere on this cliff. I wouldn't really recommend putting anything in this area because people are very likely to just put a sentry up here when dewarding this. If they are dewarding this, they'll get most of the vision. Or they could put right here. I think we saw this last time. You can actually put pretty extremely up here to block if you want. This is not a very common ward spot by any means, so I think putting a sentry here would be decent. But the best ones are definitely up here, really. Like, I feel like it's dangerous to do it here when you could just simply put it up here. And a place where they're very, very unlikely to have vision for. Like, because the sentry only gives a little bit of vision. Like, if we look at the sentry range, see this? These little circles here. Let me kill all this extra shit because this is overly confusing, but these two small circles are the vision that it gives you, I believe, when you place it, only for a couple seconds. So if you separate these two enough, they're not going to be able to see each other. So these are your best spots for blocking. Your opponent's going to have to 50-50 gamble with you to figure out which one's the real one. So this camp is almost impossible to deward, I would say. Very, very low chances of you actually getting the right one. And that's it for the Dire side. Okay, back on the Radiant side, take a look at the spots. You cannot go on the cliff here. Just curves around a little bit. You can't block in there. Now, I think last time that we looked at this, there were some spots in here that we could squeak sentries and observe wards in. This one's okay. It blocks, it's hidden by trees slightly, but I don't think it's super amazing. I like the upper left corner. I think this one's pretty good. Oops. We can place it correctly. I think this this block is pretty good. So I feel like a lot of people, they put their sentry over on the right side. But really the best block is in the trees. There's a little bit of space in here where you can put a block in. Very simple block. This is the most common by far. To deward this, you'll have to place a little bit east of this. You can put it on this cliff here. By standing over here, you can place on this cliff. Or you can also maybe even just go over here and get attacked. But yeah, this one will also deward. Problem is that you have to be able to get into this tree, and I think the easiest way to do it, yeah, it's not very simple. It takes you 2 tangos to get in here, I think, unless we can do this one. Okay, I could probably see it with this tree. This is the important tree. If you kill this tree and you put a sentry over here, you can catch this bush or this little catch in here. That's the important part. You want to limit the amount of sentries and the amount of tangos that I have to use. But this already cost me a tango and a sentry. It's pretty expensive to deward this, just to get vision on that there and be able to attack it. And even getting that vision is maybe a little chancy. It's like the game is ending. So yeah, this is a very common place to put your sentry, but I think putting it on this cliff is a bit better because it's a little bit more centralized. Can't place anywhere along the cliff, of course. You could also put one up here. I think this one's pretty good. Don't attack these centaurs. This will catch a lot of your vision. Basically that one and this one was pretty much going to cover everything anyways. Maybe putting over here isn't worth it. I think this is probably the best sentry you can do. And it's actually pretty easy to find. There's already a little clump of flowers right on top of it. Little white clump of flowers. Place on that and boom. Camp is dewarded pretty much. The only exceptions are this bottom right corner, pretty much. Anywhere around this little strip on the bottom is not going to get covered. So I'd say this is your best sentry by far, without a doubt. With that said, that makes this spot more valuable because then people are likely to place here. If this spot is popular, then your aggressive movements change. Then it's now popular to put an observer or a sentry down there. Alright, the game's about to end. Not looking good. So let's run this along really quick. There's also a spot in here that you can block pretty easily. Can place like in here. This is going to block to deward that. You can, well, you need to walk down here, I think, and then kill this tree. Or this one would work. And then boom, very easy to find to deward that left side. Pretty much this whole clump of trees is covered. Kill that one. Upper right limit is all the way right here. Something like that, because we can't quite place in the right. Another really good spot is over here. But this one's pretty easy to find because it doesn't look like there's the best sentry spots here, but you can place like right here, and that's going to get caught. But the most popular spots on this one are probably this spot, and that's going to require 2 sentries no matter what. So it would force them to use 2 sentries. In most cases, they won't do that. So basically, the story is, If you're really trying to gimp somebody, on these two camps, I would put a sentry in here, and I would put my second sentry way down here. If you put one in here, and you put one in here, you can get it with 2 sentries and 2 tangos, which is really dangerous. So I would spread it out. 1 sentry here, 1 sentry like down here in the bottom corner. And again, it comes down to movement. If you see your opponents moving, you know about where they're sentrying from or where they're blocking from, and you can make educated guesses about where their camps are going to be. So that's really important. And the final camp. We talked about this one a little bit because we talked about the magic rectangle, but our leftmost limit is based on this plant down here. It goes over to the right to the magic bush, and then it goes up again a little bit past the pole. And you can actually block all the way down to the stairwell, which is a bit interesting. Very common ward spot right here. If this camp is ever blocked and the small camp is not blocked, I guarantee you that the observer ward is almost always right here. Almost always. At least in the early game. In the early game, it's very common because this gives vision of the river. This is a very good ward spot, but it also blocks your opponents. This would be a little bit of a tricky observer ward spot, but the sentry also covers it. The common sentry spots will spot it out. This should really be placed more left. Getting maximum value. Yeah, this observer ward spot I don't really recommend. Unless you're also trying to block your opponent, but that's just too obvious, I feel. Way too obvious. So that spot's very common. A lot of people misplace their observer ward when they're walking through. They're like, oh, I'll put it in the river, or I'll put it in the middle of the jungle. But then, boom, it blocks this camp, and then it's obvious there's an observer ward there. You sentry it, boom, easy kill. So if you want to block this camp, there's some trickier spots to put it down. You can put extremes of the right, as we just saw. If it's a sentry, that's not a big deal. You can do magic bush, but that's a little obvious. You can do bottom left corner. This one's actually starting to get good, but it's spotted by the leftmost point. You can do some tricky ones, put it inside the jungle. There's a little bit of pathway that you can walk in here. Putting a sentry in there is sometimes good, because even if they do put a sentry down, that might not always walk in there. In fact, I would say your best sentry is maybe there, because then you're blocked from vision because the trees are in the way. The only way you'd see that is if you walk into the camp and stand here. This one's okay. Within the trees themselves, I don't think there's a... Oh, never mind. Found one. Alright, this spot's amazing. This spot's really, really good. Sentry inside the trees there is going to block as well. I would say if you're aggressively trialing and you're playing against like a Chen or something, blocking this camp is mandatory because that's where he's going to get the large majority of his strong creeps. So I would say either putting a sentry here is mandatory, or maybe back here would be alright. That spot's okay. That one's going to be hard to see. You're going to have to walk over here to spot it out. You can also put some sentries in places like this. Actually don't know how you can see that one. Let's take a look. Kill these other wards while we're waiting. No vision, no vision, no vision. Alright, you see it there. I didn't realize you could walk all the way in there. I learned something today, guys. It's really... What if I kill this? Can I walk in there then? Yeah. This is actually a really good hiding spot. I did not realize you could come... I thought it was just an L shape. This is a really, really good hiding spot. Oh, I do have some vision to the left, though. There's a chance that my opponent standing near me would be able to see me. See? Gives me a little bit of vision here. You learn so many interesting things going over this. Like, I'm literally just trying to talk about wards, but I'm learning about juke spots and where you can stand, where you can blink to. You can block right here as well. This one's pretty good. So let's say your best spots are basically here. This little spot in here. That one's pretty good. This one's really good. If you have an observer ward and you feel a little greedy, this one's really good. You can magic bush if you're ultra greedy, or you can do left corners. To deward this, I would probably aim for a leftmost point. That one looks pretty good. Catches almost all those good spots. And then the rightmost point as well is probably what I would do. Although to be entirely honest, a lot of the times I'll put a sentry down here. If we take a look at our crisscrossing sentries, the best spot, or the spot that evades us, is right here. But I think that's just not safe to go for. You could also be a little tricky. Maybe kill one of these trees and put a sentry right there. But it's possibly obvious. So yeah, I don't like putting in a block here because it's very common for people to put a sentry here. This is one of the most common deward spots in the game. People will very often put it right there. And this kind of tells me, by the way, that if these blocks or these camps aren't blocked, you could actually very reliably put your sentry a little bit more south here. Something like this. This one looks pretty good. Covers a lot more vision. Alright, I did it. Covered all the spawn camps. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned more about Reborn. Again, just a quick review. If you guys are still here, I'm just going to keep going. What the hell? Let's do a quick review. It's all about the parts on the map. Let's take a look at them and see if we get them right. Bush to tree is our right. Our leftmost extreme is a rectangle that's about here, and it goes down. So we're basically going all the way down to here. Let's check if we're right. Nope, I was a little bit wrong. It's basically to the right of this tree here. It's basically the left limit of the bush, all the way down to the tree, over to the bush. And then we go up, then it goes to this tree, and then it goes left all the way over. Okay, we knew that one. Let's do the other one. Turn it off. I shouldn't have looked. Wiping my brain. Okay. We see our flower. We see our little box. Right there. Right there. Oh wait, I can't teleport across the map, otherwise I would. Boom. Right there. That's our beautiful spot. Is that it? Yeah, I think that's it. Alright, thanks for watching, bye.